From micro enterprises to multinational conglomerates, businesses across every industry around the world are becoming more dependent, and information and communication technologies requiring a secure, stable, and trusted internet connection to carry out their daily operations. Simply put, the digital economy is creating new opportunities for global growth and prosperity. If nurtured appropriately, technological advances and digital connectivity can spur innovation in business models, business networking, and knowledge transfer, while also facilitating access to international markets. Every time users connect to the digital world, they contribute directly to the growth of cloud data. Cloud computing, among other emerging digital trends, such as mobile web services, smart grids, and social media, are radically changing the business landscape, reshaping the nature of work, as well as the responsibilities of enterprises. While this new technology brings great benefits and opportunities to corporations, they also raise new challenges both on the operational and ethical levels. That said, digital economy offers enormous opportunities to boost productivity, growth, and jobs, but these opportunities must be weighed against their potential risks. Understanding how the digital economy will shape the future of the business world will help policymakers devise the necessary plans to harness the economy benefits of innovative technologies while mitigating the negative social impact that might ensue from the new reality. Well, during this panel, we will be focusing on the new economy. I will start with Rita. Thanks for being with us. The digital economy, first of all, what is it? And how will it transform our life? في سؤال تركي الموضوع المصاري علي أنا.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again, Dr. Chidiac, for having me in this great event, and then to all organizers. It means a lot to me, and I hope with this discussion today and brainstorming together and followed by other initiatives, we can drive digital transformation in Lebanon to a digital society in the near future. So to your question, Maurice.
Concerning the digital economy.
Exactly. So for the past 20 years, the pace of change is accelerating too fast, moving us to a world of, or a network of intelligence where everything is connected. So we believe that everything that benefits from being connected will be connected. People, devices, machines, everything. And then this will bring a lot of insights and data that was not before, that didn't exist before. And then these data will help us enabling new business models and then new opportunities to enhance customer experience. So we can provide citizens and people what they need even before they know what they need in order to increase efficiencies through automation and then also, of course, improve our quality of life. So businesses are reinventing or redefining value chain. And then here we see new business models in place. For instance, Uber, like it's the largest taxi company, owns no taxi. Facebook, the world largest media company, creates no content. So if also governments are trying to build smart cities, to digitize the citizens' experience as well, and then make sure that everyone has access to all, and all services are affordable. So we are for sure in very transformative time. From all the world, around all the world, like from Sweden to Shanghai to UAE to Lebanon, hopefully as well, there is a new innovations and new technologies that are driving breakthrough in humans' greatest time. For example, from fighting against diseases. Now, artificial intelligence was able to develop cure for Parkinson, or providing access for everyone to information and economic opportunity. For example, banking the unbanked through mobile financial services in emerging markets, or connect to learn for children in rural areas too. So the digital economy or the impact of the digital economy is around $3 trillion. And then this is expressed in terms of efficiencies and unit demand, which is a huge impact on the whole economy as such. But in order to capitalize on this progress, we need to invest in infrastructure.
What kind of investments?
We need to invest in infrastructure, and then we need to develop for policies and then a framework. 2018 has put technology and regulation at crossroads. So now the question is how develop or how we keep pace the regulation while the technology is evolving, and then while driving innovation. Because of course, purpose matters as much as policy.
Thank you. David, Parrish, thanks for being with us also. Your point of view concerning the digital economy and how it could change our life.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be here to share my experience, but also to learn from you as we have this discussion this afternoon. Let me explain my perspective on the questions we're facing. My perspective comes from my experience of working around the world helping creative and digital businesses to become even more successful. I do that as a consultant, as a trainer, as a speaker, and as the author of 2 books. I work in what's known as the creative industries, sometimes known as the creative and digital industries, or the orange economy, or even the experience economy. And that, for example, includes businesses such as those in film, publishing, computer games, the performing arts, design, and other artistic sectors. And I've been lucky enough to work in more than 50 countries around the world, helping those businesses, but also learning from them as I go. We must remember that this economy is not just made up of the mega corporations who hit the news headlines. Of course, we're all interested in what happens with Facebook and Uber and Apple and Amazon and Twitter, of course. But below that news radar are millions and millions of small and medium-sized enterprises, indeed micro-enterprises, that are part of this economy. For creative and digital entrepreneurs nowadays, there are absolutely amazing opportunities. It's a magnificent world. The potential for scalability is staggering. Even small businesses can achieve global reach. Even the smallest of market niches can be commercialized profitably. Access to finance is no longer just in the hands of banks and venture capitalists, because now we have crowdfunding. And film distribution is no longer controlled just by the big corporations and Hollywood, because we have YouTube. So I think there's been a democratizing effect. Anybody can join this huge digital economy, and that's very exciting. And that includes, right at the micro level, solopreneurs, individuals running their businesses as digital nomads, traveling around the world with their laptops, running their businesses, their location-independent businesses, which might be in computer programming or journalism or publishing or writing. So I think that as we face these issues, we must remember the smaller and medium-sized enterprises, because they face and have to deal with the complexity of things like privacy as well. I know around the world, many businesses, smaller businesses, have struggled to deal with the GDPR regulations about customer data. But it applies to commercial data as well. And even me, as a one-person company, holds a lot of client data which I must keep confidential, even though some of it is in the cloud, and frankly, I'm not quite sure where it is. It just, everything goes around. Nevertheless, I have to be conscientious about keeping it secure. So my message is that let's not only focus on the mega corporations, let's not just focus on the economies of the West, but also on millions of smaller businesses in the creative and digital industries all around the world. Thank you.
Well, Amanda,
Yes.
concerning, okay, I'll be asking about the, I have a lot of questions here, so let me start with, okay, fine. How do we define a digital transformation process that makes sense for us?
So when you speak of a digital transformation process, are you speaking about how it is that we navigate this
Exactly.
very complex process of
Exactly.
digital transformation? I think what's most important for us as we go through all of the shifts that are occurring as a result of the introduction of digital and the acceleration of digital is that we start to pay attention to this fear conversation that many of us are having around the dark side of what technology is going to do. Specifically, is automation going to put everyone out of jobs, or are we going to all be slave to our phones in ways that we lose control of our agency as humans? And I think what's most important in terms of navigating the digital transformation process is that we remember that we created these technologies, whether consciously or unconsciously, to mirror what it is that we value as a collective. And that technology is really only a tool that we create in order to facilitate what it is that we want in our lives. So I think what's most important as we navigate this digital transformation process is that we don't give too much of our power away to the technology, and remember that we are the ones creating it and shaping it, and that we do so intentionally.
Thank you. Goncalo, concerning the digital economy, and why is a focus on the digital economy and society is important? This is first. And second, how will it affect also their daily lives?
Yeah, actually, is it working? Yes, it is. First of all, I would like to warmly thank you, Dr. May Chidiac, for inviting me to be here today. Thank you. Now, I would like to give you more a policy perspective. So, when we think about the digital economy, we might think that everything is digitalized already. Actually, that's not true. If you see it globally, only 10% of the economy is digitalized, very much on sectors such as ICT and media. But if you look at sectors like energy, health, manufacturing, they are not digitalized at all. But they will. At some point, they will be digitalized.
On the way.
So how we deal with it? I think there's two options. Do we let others develop those technologies that will impact these sectors with all the impact that might bring to jobs and to the societies? Or will we be on the driving seat and shape those technologies and make our options? So I think it's clear. It should be the second option. And the second option, there's a key element to achieve it, which I think it's investment. And investment on five elements. On top infrastructure, so that's one of the first ones, top infrastructure on 5G networks, computing power, and so forth. The second one would be investment on research and development. We will be speaking about top technologies. If you see artificial intelligence or blockchain, they are going back to the base of fundamental science. So we need to invest a lot on research and development. The third one will be about skills. And skills here, I mean about, if you look at the globe, there's going on, and perhaps my colleagues will mention that, there's a global race for talent. Because as technologies are being developed, there's not enough talent people to cope with it. So my advice here would be to make university students that are on computer science, or bring more people to computer science, but also make computer science students learn arts, and make art students learn computer science, because it will be in the intersection of disciplines that innovation will happen. So, and the fourth one is of course, invest on tech-based and top tech technologies based on data. That's the future. It's data. It's as they say, it's the new oil. So invest a lot on those technologies based on data. And the fifth one, it's funding. So there's two types of funding. The normal funding, which goes on incremental innovation, And on incremental innovation, we can make products better, we can make products cheaper, more efficient. But this kind of innovation, although we need it, it has a downside, which is job destruction. Actually, here I already give an example of Uber. Uber is a type of incremental innovation. It bring to the taxi sector more efficiency, better service. So this is one type of innovation. But then there's another one, which I think is particularly interesting, and I think where we should bet more on is on risk funding. And risk funding on disruptive innovations. And these disruptive innovations are the ones who create new markets. If you look at the 80s when personal computers arrived, everybody was working without them. But they created a new market. They created new jobs. So these type of innovations, the disruptive innovations, are the ones who create new jobs. If you look at the smartphones, we lived perfectly without smartphones before, but then they created new jobs. If you look a couple of years ago, there was no social media manager as a role. So we have to prepare for that. That's what I think.
I'll be asking also about the reshaping of the labor market. But before, Dirk, thanks for being with us also. It's a pleasure. The transformation to a digital economy is independent to the size and the resources for any country. But it provides the scope for global reach. Do you think at that point that Lebanon can achieve a step change in its growth and what we call it also the value creation?
Yes, thank you, Maurice. And also thank you very much, Dr. Chidiac, to have invited us on behalf of the EBRD. It's a great pleasure. Yes, because I think one of the elements that the digital economy changes really is that it dilutes the borders between industry sectors. You know, you don't have a technology sector anymore as distinct from the financial services sector, for example, because fintech bridges it. The same with logistics. We know the e-commerce marketplaces that basically bring sellers and buyers virtually together. And all of this is based on intellectual capacity, intellectual property. It is innovation, which is basically in your minds. And I think Lebanon in particular, as a, let's say, fairly small country without meaningful natural resources to grow its wealth on, but a great educational system, is very well placed to actually pursue the digitization, the innovative, the disruptive technologies, because it is completely independent of the size of your countries. Not only do sector distinctions blur, also geographic distinctions blur, because this technology essentially has no boundaries. Now, Lebanon, to my understanding, of course, has one of the most difficulties in achieving that, given the history of constant crisis and all of this, the constant need to rebuild. But digital transformation, the skills that you develop in your universities, the entrepreneurial spirit, is in fact the basis, in my view, to leapfrog rather than catch up on developments that other countries have. So therefore, I think, for me, I'm very optimistic in that regard. As the EBRD, we're sort of also trying to combine maybe some of the aspects that Goncalo mentioned, you know, engage in policy dialogue for the governments to provide frameworks and parameters in which the private sector can actually thrive. And Amanda, as an ex-entrepreneur, she sort of sits on the other end of the risk spectrum where I'm in as a banker, but we invest in startups. We invest with venture capital as well, so are quite well placed to sort of bring these two sides together.
بس قبل ما نكفي لو سمحتوا لأشخاص التليفون مش سايلنت، لو سمحتوا نحط التليفونات سايلنت لأنه كتير عم بدق التليفون. Donc les personnes, si vous voulez, s'il vous plaît, mettre vos téléphones en mode silencieux parce que ça dérange un peu. So try to turn on your mobiles to the silent mode. Thank you. لا بس لأنه عم يدقدوا كتير التليفونات كرمال هيك. Thank you. We need to think about social problems and how to address the fact that even growing economies may need fewer and fewer people in the workforces in the long run. David, how is the digital economy reshaping the labor market?
I think one of the things that I notice around the world is how the digital economy empowers people to become entrepreneurs. The barriers to entry of setting up your own business are lower than ever before. In the old days, in the industrial model, people worked as employees for big corporations or for companies or factories. Now, individuals who might not want to work in that economy, or might not have the skills, or have different skills, can set up on their own as a filmmaker, as a website designer, as all kinds of things, especially in the creative sector. And so I find it very exciting that people are more in control of their own destinies, their own careers, and their own businesses. And I think that the education system is not really geared up for helping people to be creative in that kind of way. The education system was really set up to help people to be factory workers. As long as they could read and write and obey instructions, they could go in the army or go in a factory. It wasn't much different. But nowadays, I think there's a parallel education system. Teenagers go to school, they learn the conventional subjects, they might be taught in a boring way, they don't take much notice, and then they go home and they go on YouTube and they learn how to make films, how to distribute films, how to make money, how to do all kinds of things. So there's almost like a parallel education system going on, and I think that the people with the most creativity and initiative are training themselves to have the skills to become entrepreneurs in this new creative and digital economy.
I would like to hear also your point of view, Dirk.
Yes, I mean, I would agree basically with the general assessment. I like the idea of the parallel educational universe. If I look at, if my father wants to use a smartphone, he's looking for a manual. If my daughters find a smartphone, they do this completely intuitively. There's a completely different way the brains, I think, are being rewired. On a larger scale, though, I think if you take innovation to its extreme, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, all of this, in extremis, we abolish the human input into the economic cycle. We become economically useless, essentially. It is not only, if you will, the hazardous manufacturing tasks that artificial intelligence has replaced. It is financial services. It is also the legal profession. Why would a young legal associate spend all-nighters to put a 500-page document together, of which 95% is standardized clauses? All of this can easily be transformed, which makes the life a lot easier, but I think it means at the end of the day that even the higher sophisticated jobs are actually not immune from being replaced. So people will need to change, but I think regardless that new opportunities will be created, at the end of the day, more value will be created without direct human input, and that leads to social problems, because how does a government, and that I think is the government's task then, how do we help the private sector to accommodate this? The entrepreneurs, it's not really their task to actually think about this. They go forward, they have a great idea, they do everything to get this thing, their idea implemented. They don't think, and it's not their task, of wider social implications usually. But the government needs to sort of pull this together and create an environment where you don't come to a situation where a larger and larger percentage of the population is no longer productive and doesn't have the means to live.
Amanda, as you're a financial expert, so what effects does the new economy have on productivity in global?
On productivity?
Yeah.
Well, I think ideally it's supposed to make us more productive to the extent that we feel as though we have to work less. I don't know if anyone here is actually experiencing it in that way. I definitely see that from an economic perspective. We are absolutely more productive as a result of technology, and even personally within our organizations and our jobs, we're able to produce more because of the way in which we can iterate rapidly through the development of ideas and concepts, and able to go to market much faster, and able to get feedback on what's working and change and adapt and produce better objects as a result of this digital productivity. Yet at the same time, we seem to be also creating this endless black hole of opportunity, as I call it, the rabbit hole, which is because there's so much opportunity with digital that we are able to then generate so much more opportunity that we then have to fill. So perhaps you'll see a theme in a lot of my, I'm neither an optimist nor am I a skeptic. It's always looking at both sides and not being overly idealistic or overly doomsday about any of this. From the productivity standpoint, as well as many other aspects of digital technology, I think that there's the upside, which is we can be more productive and produce more rapidly, but at the same time, there's so much more opportunity of things to do that we could fill all of our days and never actually reach the benefits of that added productivity.
Well, also there is always a need to have good policies and regulations to ensure, yes, the development, but also to ensure ethical and responsible also use of technology. What do you think, Rita?
No, definitely. We are all traveling into the digital planet here, but every country is going into the journey differently. And then I believe in Lebanon, especially when it comes to regulation, there is a lot of work happening on the private sector. So we have a lot of innovations there. We have a lot of support to startups, building this ecosystem, to entrepreneurs, as you just mentioned. There are also some support on the funding side of things. But what needs to happen more is things needs to come as well. There needs to be complemented from government side. So we need just to have a working group at the government side, entities, trying to match those innovation into government entities and then try to align framework and policies accordingly. Because we cannot reach the full technology potential if the people doesn't trust the technology, if people they are not confident about this technology. So we need to ensure that the technology is used in a very ethical way and then in a responsible way. And then for this,
so this is the role of the regulations.
Sorry?
So this is the role of the regulations.
This is the role of regulation. Now, this is the role of regulation, this is one, but us as a business leader, decision makers, as citizens as well, we need as well just to contribute into this. So yes, you're right, I agree that the regulation, the government needs to take a leading role here, try to bridge between the innovation happening on the public side, private side, and then try just to match it into the public sector too.
Thank you. Goncalo.
Can I jump on that?
Yeah, go ahead. Please.
Okay. Yeah, actually, Rita was right, mentioned the role of governments and regulations. The key challenges we have, I mentioned the key element on the digital economy, but the digital society cannot be disentangled from the digital economy. And there is a role for us to play, and that is if from one hand we want to open the digital economy on a digital society, we need to protect. And here we need to protect citizens' privacy. As we see it with the recent cases from Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, actually the European Union was right 10 years ago when we started discussing the General Data Protection Regulation, which today ensures that every EU citizen has his data protected all over the world. So we were right on that time. Also, governments should be responsible as well by protecting citizens' security, and here I mean cybersecurity. That's a key element. We need to trust on cyberspace. Here I also would like to congratulate Lebanon because they joined last week as well the Paris Call for Trust and Security in Cyberspace, signed last week together with EU countries, with Mexico, Japan. Unfortunately, big countries were left. They didn't sign, but that's a very good step. So I would like to congratulate Lebanon on that. Because we need to protect human law and rights online the same way we do offline. We need to protect election hacking and cyber espionage. We need to avoid cyber attacks on critical infrastructures. And we need to tackle the spread of misinformation. So this is the role of governments and together with companies. To solve that, I think we need a key element, and here it was mentioned already many times. This is education. We need kids to learn. Nowadays, in my generation, the key element was how do I search information? Nowadays, information is everywhere. The problem is that it's so much. We need to teach them how to filter that information, how to trust on that information. That's very, very, very important. And then prepare them for new skills, as I mentioned before. There's a huge challenge for education because we need to prepare kids for jobs that we don't know how they will look like in the future, in 5 years. That's a huge challenge, I believe. And also, lastly, look for new knowledge. New knowledge is the new capital for moving up the social ladder.
Well, thank you. David, it's a must for the enterprises to design their customer experience. How has this changed in the last few years?
Well, speaking as a marketing consultant, I find it absolutely fascinating how customer behavior,
Dr. May, بدك تخصمي كمان.
So yes, it's back. I find it absolutely fascinating and mind-blowing, actually, how customer behaviour and expectations have changed over the last several years, or in that last 20 or 30 years, certainly, as the digital economy has grown. I think I was reminded of this actually when I visited my auntie the other day. She was 92 years old, and she was telling me that in her young days, she had to remind me there was no Netflix, there was no television, and people would consume entertainment collectively because they would just go to the one cinema in the town and all watch on a Saturday night at a time the cinema dictated, a film that the cinema dictated, and that was your only choice. So she has a completely different mindset as a consumer. And it made me smile, I have to say, when I was showing her how to use her new digital TV. And I said, look, Auntie, if you're watching a film and you need to take a break, etc. But more consumers now want to be involved in the creative process. They want to comment. They want to be involved in different ways. They're no longer satisfied to be passive consumers, and certainly not collective consumers. So businesses and organizations in the digital economy, of course, have to deal with this. And they will lose out if they expect customers to be passive, not to want to be involved, and not to have choices. So I think there are great innovations now, and any successful business has to take account of the massive, overwhelming changes in customer behavior and customer expectations.
Thank you, David. Dirk, there is a main role for the private sector driving the innovation, but also there is a role for the public sector to provide the kind of the ecosystem it needs.
Yes, it's something that I touched upon just sort of in my introductory remarks. I think both sectors need to work together because the public sector, the government, in other words, has the broader overview of what society actually needs. An individual entrepreneur in a private company isn't really worried about what the implication of his innovation is for the wider society. So the government's role, in my view, would not be to interfere in the business itself, but it would be to create a platform, a framework, a set of rules that makes sure that what is created in some pockets of the economy is actually beneficial to the wider society. This sounds pretty simple, but of course that is something That is difficult to do. It's also difficult to do because there's not one think tank where the government can go to and say, what is innovation, what is happening? This is a chaotic process of simultaneous creation. So it takes time. It takes time. Even we as a bank, we sometimes scratch our heads and try to figure out where do we get the information from to understand what digitization has to do with our traditional business model, how we bank different sectors of the economy in our sectors, how do we go about regional expansion. So this creativity needs to somehow be translated into action by the government as well, and I think someone mentioned workshops that the government proactively assigns people to educate themselves, delve into this infrastructure, which is chaotic. So a little bit where I think a government organization and even ourselves as a bank are inherently not yet fully ready, whereas entrepreneurs obviously live in that and thrive in that area.
I think, Rita, also you have something to say.
I agree. The thing is that when you want to invest in the digital economy, you need to have an agenda in mind. And then it is the government who needs to set this agenda. So we have seen that in different countries, like the approach of governments is different. There is something that we call like Digital Evolution Index score that definitely differs from a country to another one. So if we take examples like Estonia, Sweden, US, even UAE, they have stood out. They have highly innovative companies across like their entities, but at the same time, the government is taking strong ownership and leadership into this digitization. In a way, for example, in UAE, they have appointed an artificial intelligence minister. In Sweden, they appointed the first female chief digital officer. For example, in New York, they have the chief technology officer part of the mayor office. So this type of leadership is really needed to make the bridge between the private sector and the public sector there. Now, if we want to take an example a little bit closer, in some other countries like in Jordan or even Egypt, in Egypt they put for themselves a target just to be near cashless society by 2023. Same in Jordan as well. They are driving digital financial services together with the private sector there. So it's important to set up the directives on what we want to achieve. And then, if we take the example, for instance, Estonia, which is the most digital society in the world, when they started their journey 20 years ago, they didn't have any collected data for their citizen. Even the majority of the population there, they didn't have access to internet, even access to the devices to use this internet. But of course, it took them a lot of courage just to go into this journey. And then
But in Lebanon, do you think how far we are?
In Lebanon, I think we need to choose a relevant country, because as I mentioned, the people who started the journey at that time when they started, they were not as advanced as they are today. So we need to just try to not to copy, but just to take them as an example to go into this journey. And then again, I believe that, as I said before, private sector is doing a lot of innovation. What we need to do is we need to match this through pilots, through entities in the government in order to make this really happen.
So here I have a question for Amanda, David, and Goncalo. Same question. What key trends, like an exam, fine. What key trends will we be seeing in the digital economy? So let's have some key trends, some quick points.
Exactly. Well, the key trend will be artificial intelligence for sure. Nevertheless, I would like to build up on what Rita just said. It's up to the governments actually to come up and with leadership. In the EU, we decided that the next framework program, we will just put 10 billion on top of a digital program, which 3 billion with just straight to artificial intelligence. But this is just a piece on the ocean, because if you look at China or the US, or even just for Google, it's triple. So my key message also for Lebanon is to look for partnerships. That's what the EU did. So if I look at my country, Portugal, they will be a drop in the ocean if they try to cope with all this development. That's why being part of the EU, we will be stronger. And that's the role of governments also to take this leadership and this future mindset. Now, a key trend, it will be artificial intelligence. Whether we like it or not, it will come very, very quickly. The question here, well, I'm a tech optimist, but if you listen what Stephen Hawking said last year before he died, last year at the Web Summit in Portugal, he said that AI will be either the best or the worst thing for humanity. So I hope it will be the best thing for the humanity, and that's why I'm fighting every day to try to find and develop the right policies and the right mindset around artificial intelligence. And one key element here will be ethics. So we will need to teach how we will need to educate how AI will be developed in the future. It's not regulated, but it's educated how it should be.
Okay, let me hear also Amanda. What do you think?
Well, I sold my company last November, and I've been consulting for a variety of organizations, from helping educate little girls in the poorest countries in Africa all the way to working on US political elections. And the number one trend that I see everyone moving toward is to figure out how to automate reaching the person who you want to reach and who wants to reach you. So it's a combination of automation and the very detailed, specific targeting that is now possible. As a result of that, the trend that I'm hoping to see emerge, which I don't really see talked about a lot, is the transparency behind this data. Because what's going to happen as a result of a lot of these automations and targeting is it's going to be very nuanced in how it communicates with you, when it communicates with you, the channels through which it communicates with you, because inundation doesn't work. There's just too much noise in everyone's inboxes and text messages, et cetera. So in addition to that being the trend of automation and hyper targeting, how are we going to be transparent about the data and the algorithms that organizations are using you to hopefully get you to respond?
Thank you. David?
For me, I think I see in the creative and digital industries three very clear trends. One, and I've mentioned some of these before earlier on. The first one is the level of participation. The barriers to entry are lower than ever before. More and more people can set up businesses in the creative economy. I'm thinking of micro businesses of less than 10 people and bigger than that. But many more people can participate as entrepreneurs, and I think that's very exciting and very liberating. Secondly, the global reach that these even smaller businesses can have. So even a business of 4 or 5 people based in Liverpool in England can have customers all over the world. And I think it links also to what Amanda just said about particular niches, about targeting. Because if your business serves even a tiny niche, even a fraction of 1% of one country's population, you can still make a living out of it. But you have to be very precise in the way that you connect with the right kind of customers. And thirdly, as mentioned earlier, I think it's the way that consumers are changing their behavior and their expectations, because businesses are having to keep up with changing demands, and the demands and expectations of consumers as they become more sophisticated, engaging with the digital economy, those demands increase exponentially. So I think that's a very clear trend as well. They're the three things that I see most clearly.
Thank you, David. I'll be taking some questions from the audience. Yes, please. We need the microphone, please. Wow, we have a lot. Hello. It's working, I think. It's working. Just try it. No, it's not working. The mic's not working. It's not working. Yeah.
It's working now. My name is Maher Saloom. I'm Lebanese American. I would like to ask Mr. Carrico about a related, actually, he made me feel proud of him when he mentioned something about ethics and responsibility. We do in NGOs of Lebanon, I have an NGO, baby NGO. We stressed a lot about responsibility in the society. So the citizen is responsible as such when the state is absent. Everywhere in the world, sometimes the state is absent. It's not taking full responsibility of actions. Now, relating to digital economy, and fully responsible when building societies, building between the private sector and the public sector. Can you give us an example about, are you from Portugal, if I'm not mistaken? I would like to correlate between Lebanon and Portugal, which I really respect. And I'm a fan of Cristiano Ronaldo, by the way. And for the gentleman, one more question from England, I think, the marketing consultant. How would you foresee actually the cooperation between the UK and Lebanon actually, whether in digital economy or in business economics? Thank you very much.
So let's start with Goncalo.
Thank you. I also like very much Cristiano Ronaldo. Yeah, well, ethics will be very important, and in Portugal, as I said, we are part of the European Union, so we have a perfect partner. And at the European Union level, they are looking at it very deeply. They set it up recently, a high-level group on ethics for artificial intelligence, where they bring governments, academics, private sector, organizations, and they are discussing deeply how to take ethics into account while developing artificial intelligence. And I must say it's not an easy task. I'm from Portugal, but I live and work in Brussels, and you have conferences on artificial intelligence or in ethics every day. And the debate is quite polarized. It goes in areas that the human brain almost cannot reach, but it's going to be very, very difficult to come up with something. The important element here, and that's our vision as the European Union, is that we will try to come up with an ethical behavior for AI development. And we expect, the same as we are doing with GDPR, we expect that it will spread all over the world. We are one of the strongest economies in the world, so that's our hope. But to reach that level, it's going to take long, because it's really difficult, really, really difficult.
Yeah, your second question was for David.
Yeah, regarding the question of cooperation and trade between Lebanon and the UK, I think I see it on two different levels. There could be at the national level between governments, trade agreements, cooperation agreements, and who knows what will happen when Britain leaves the EU, because all sorts of new trading relationships will have to be formed. But let's not talk about Brexit, that's a massive subject. I think, but also at the level of individual enterprises. And as I said before, there are more and more of these micro enterprises cooperating, operating globally, even though they might be quite small. So I think there are huge opportunities for trading cooperation, customer relationships, collaborations and joint ventures between creative and digital industries and businesses in Lebanon and the UK. And people are getting more comfortable nowadays with reaching out to each other, actually traveling for business conferences. The world is getting smaller in every sense. So I can only predict that there will be, through market forces and opportunism and all those different dynamics of trade, there will be more cooperation at an enterprise level between businesses in Lebanon and in the UK.
Thank you. As requested by the organizers, I'll be taking just two questions. The first one will be for my cousin, Philippe. He's here. You know he's my cousin, doctor.
Originally from the same, from Lich.
Exactly.
Hello, everyone. My name is Philip Abu Zaid. I'm
Our
a
hometown.
TV reporter and producer at MTV. I have two questions. Since we have a digital marketer and we have a banker, what is the future of cryptocurrency? And will banks admit it as an official currency, since we're talking about everything is becoming digital, so also the money will be digital? And the second question is the role of, of content, the importance of content to attract in marketing, and can we trust Facebook for, let's say, for SMEs? Because I've read an article 2 days ago that the results we're getting from the analytics of Facebook are 900% more than they are in real when it comes to views and to clicks and to everything else. So back again to the question of ethics.
Do you want someone specific to answer you? Or
Basically,
it
between David
should be
and
Derek maybe also.
it's between David and Dirk.
Yeah.
for the cryptocurrency.
Concerning the
If I
cryptocurrency.
maybe take this cryptocurrency part
Yeah,
of the
and the
question.
Bitcoin
I
and-
saw you smiling.
No, because I was smiling because recently, as the bank, we were looking at a blockchain company to invest in. And that blockchain created, in the context of doing this, Bitcoins. And of course, Bitcoins are associated with a lot of negative connotations, but also sitting in front of the investment committee, we found out that for most of us, blockchain combined everything we do not understand about computers with everything we do not understand about money. So what could possibly go wrong, right? So it was a very difficult task. And what it tells me is that new technologies are emerging. Blockchain is probably here to stay. It is not yet scalable. Banks are using it already, and they try to divorce it from the creation of cryptocurrencies, because cryptocurrencies are currently an unregulated market. You've seen the price drops in Bitcoin and Ethereum after the regulator stepped in and say, we are going to regulate this. So the technology, I think, is good. The creation of a cryptocurrency, I think, will not happen as quickly as perhaps investors or speculators thought. If it will establish itself, quite frankly, I don't know, but we're looking more, I would say, on the blockchain as an enabler of payment streams, for example.
The second question was about Facebook and the content, I guess. If we should trust the content for the SMEs.
Let's say the giant of technology. So how can we trust Facebook?
Who can answer this?
Well, I think your question is about content generally. Obviously, Facebook is a huge player when it comes to content, but it applies to smaller businesses who understand that they need to add more content to their websites to attract customers through search engine optimization. My own website has a lot of content for that very reason. So, and then we're overwhelmed by content as consumers. There's just far too much to handle. I think when it comes to trust, we have to remember, I'm thinking of things that have been said by my colleagues on the panel. Amanda talked, if I interpret it correctly, that technology just enables us as humans to do what we want to do as humans. And so, you know, the fact is that well before the internet and the digital age, people used to tell lies, believe it or not. It is a human trait that sometimes people tell lies. But we also, as humans, learn to tell when people are telling lies and who to trust. This is pre-digital. And again, that comes to Goncalo's point about learning how to interpret data and filter data. So I think the human traits of sometimes telling the truth, sometimes telling lies, sometimes believing, sometimes not believing, is just happening in a mega way, in a bigger way, that's enabled by technology. So the underlying issues of lying and trust and telling the truth and believing are human traits. Technology doesn't change that, it just blows it up into massive, massive proportions.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have half an hour business, a quick lunch